Hello. Happy December 22nd. Was it Wednesday, right? Yeah, it's Wednesday. Of course it's Wednesday. Obviously it's Wednesday. Everybody knows that. How is everybody? Is anybody here yet? Pretty sure Farmhouse is here. And I see Bing Cortana. I'm gonna guess is a bot. You know, who knows? Maybe Bing Cortana is a real person. Possible. I don't see Sharkies yet. I don't know whether anybody else will. Oh, I see Sharkies! Happy Wednesday! Hello. How are the Sharkies on this fine December the 22nd evening? Hi, Ben. He's staring at me very intently. Wrapping presents whilst you listen? I wrapped Farmhouse's present recently, and I did a very good job of it. You want to see? Should I show my amazing wrapping? Wow. Look at that amazing professional quality. Oh, uh-oh. Don't mind. The tape, I think, is like a year old, so it doesn't stick very well. This says potato. It's from when we did Benebic's Snack Off. Several years old. Wow, authentic. Yeah, it is an authentic wrap job, right? I agree. Yes. Yes, it's Now I know you said it was authentic already, but if you could say it was good, I think that would do my self-confidence some good. Could you tell me that the wrapping is good? Back here. What do you mean you haven't decided if you're wrapping my present? Minibic wants a present. Look at his little dance. He's such a good dancer. Look at this. Oh, he wants. Give it. Why are you holding it up there? Oh, good dance. There you go. Yeah, wrapping isn't a competition unless it is, but in this case it's not. Our Christmas present wrapping betwixt one another is not a competition. Now look, you made me say betwixt. Do you like my sweater? There. Now you can read it. It's very very Christmassy. I've had it for a little while. I don't mean to make anybody feel jealous, but Mark Hamill has touched this sweater. Let me see if I can find that picture. If it doesn't take too much effort. Let's see if I ask my picture gallery to show me Christmas. Let's see if it comes up. It may or may not. No, I don't think that's going to do it, especially since the picture was actually taken in October. let's try searching for October. Now, one thing about this sweater is I'm definitely going to have to step off camera for a moment and remove it at some point because it's warm and I am going to overheat if I'm reading while wearing this all evening. Well, there's Kevin Smith. Apparently I had my picture taken with Kevin Smith in October as well. There it is. There's me and Santa Hamill. In this sweater. As of course it, doesn't really want to focus. Well, whatever. Take my word for it. That insane looking Santa is actually Mark Hamill, I promise, and not just, some drifter or something. Oh. I don't know how much longer this sweater's gonna last. Now, the one thing that I don't actually like about this sweater is the quote's not quite right. Because it's supposed to be referring to that fictional movie from Home Alone that Kevin is watching with the gangsters, and there's a bit where Merry Christmas, you filthy animal, but this says you filthy beast, and I'm a little sad about that. But I still like it. It's just weird. It's weird that the quote is wrong. I wonder whether somebody just made a mistake or whether it was we don't want to get sued sort of thing. I kind of think somebody just made a mistake, but then again, you'd think if they're going to put it on a product and sell it that they would double check that. Because I doubt that actual line is trademarked or anything. I have a cookie, which I've already taken a bite of. And I thought I would open up this weird can thing and try this blue lemonade out on stream tonight. Hopefully it's alright. And it's weird plastic can, which still puzzles me. You were kind of as surprised as I was about the Chupa Chups. Chupa Chups? I don't even know. How do you pronounce that? Chupa Chups? Chupa Chups? Chupa Chups? Chupa Chups? It's going to be something completely different like Chowpa Chowps or something. Anyways. Farmhouse and I tried those. Farmhouse had grape and I had strawberry. And she thought that hers was weirdly actually grape flavored and not grape flavor, the weird grape soda flavor that doesn't actually taste anything like grape. She thought that it actually tasted sort of like actual grape. And the strawberry was good. It was fine. It tasted, not as sweet as I would have expected for a lollipop brand soda. But yeah, it was tasty. Doing some yoga back there, Ben? What's your tail doing down? Yeah, get that. Oh, there's that waggy tail. Choop. Chupa choop. Oh, look at him being comfy. We need to get one of his beds back up here. Or we need to get another bed. He's got so many beds right now. Just scattered all over the place. He's got one up in my bedroom, one over by our gaming table, one over by the stairs over here. He needs another bed. Oh, I don't want to say it out loud, but did we get a certain somebody a present? We might need to hit up a pet store. Oh no, we're bad people. Bad. Yeah. Oh well. We'll fix that. We'll go get one. My hair feels like it's very like, I don't know. Like, watch this. Watch this. I wish I had a green screen right now. Okay, you ready? Here I go. Now just green screen me running really fast, and that's what my hair looks like, except that, of course, while I started doing this, it stopped working. Somebody clip that, and then edit it, green screen it, so that it looks like I'm running through a city really fast. Make me, like, pass the Flash or something like that. You've all got video editing skills, right? You all have enough skills with Twitch to know about the, like, clip button thing that you can press and then it'll save a video clip of what just happened. It's in the bottom right corner of the screen. I know Lily Lily has saved a couple of clips of me doing goofy things on here. Well, I don't know if anybody else is really going to be showing up. I do see one other name that I don't recognize. Serena? Or Saralna? I think that's... I don't know. I don't know if that's a person out there or just some kind of bot. I don't know that much about Twitch. I wrote a little speech about tonight's stream that I posted in a thing where I tell people that I'm going to be doing the stream. Do you want to hear my speech? Farmhouse wants to hear it. Okay. Speech. Yeah, that's right. Let me just have a drink of water before I start this. It may be emotional, this speech. You may, I figured since this could possibly be one of the last streams of the year, we might do another one or two before the year's over, maybe. But, you know, to celebrate getting to the end of the year, I wrote a little speech for this momentous occasion. So, if you need to cry or stand up and cheer, just save it till the end if you can. All right. Good evening. In less than an hour, Book From Here will join others from around the world, and you will be launching the largest book reading in the history of mankind. Mankind. That word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interests. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 22nd of December, and you will once again be reading for our freedom, not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We are reading for our right to live, to exist, and should we win the day, the 22nd of December will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day the world declared in one voice, "We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a read. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today we celebrate our book reading day." Yeah! Woo! Yeah! And then I flew my ship up into the alien craft that was about to try and kill us all, and it exploded, but sadly I was lost. Excuse me, I'm a little emotional myself after that. The Sharkies are cheering very emotionally for me right now. I know if you're watching this as a recording later on, you can't see the chat on screen, but there's lots of people that are cheering me on and are very like excited about the speech that just happened. It just doesn't, you can't hear the cheers because I'm streaming this, and I don't have live reactions like on the recording. Anyways, that's my original speech that slurp. So I'm gonna stand up and step off screen for a second to take this sweater off. Give me a sec. I got. Okay. Yep. Yep. Stormy just yawned, but no reflection on my speech. No, I mean, of course. That I'm sure Stormy also probably very much liked the speech. And I imagine that, as you can see me in the reflection there, maybe a reaction to the slurp. He just yawned again. Okay, I'm back. So what do you think? Should we read some book? I think we have to after that speech. Hi, pup. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. Does that sound good to you? We are on page 94 at the beginning of chapter 8. So we've had some interesting stuff recently. Oh man, I wish I had a more festive sweater. That would have been really good. You had a better idea than I did. Next year, I guess. I'll have to remember. So there's been some interesting stuff happening. The last chapter, I think we got to relax a little bit after the excitement of the escape from Faldor's farm. I say escape, but you know, they were running away trying to skip out on Brill and anyone else that might have been trying to keep an eye on them or pursue them. But things slowed down a little bit after that. They made it to the coastal port town of Garion. Let's find Garion on the map, huh? I'm not actually 100% certain where Garion is. Because they're in Sendaria. So there's Sendar. I see Sendar on the map. Oh, okay. Darina's more northern than I was. Well, no, I guess that makes sense. It holds up. Sorry, I just got a message from my cousin. So, on the map here, oh, I lost my bookmark, but I know where we're at. Actually, I've got the page still. So let's see if I can get it to focus at all. So, Sendaria is this little kingdom up here. Much smaller, it seems, than Arendia or Algaria. Though Cherik doesn't look that big, but I don't know if we can see the entirety of Cherik. Anyway, so they are not actually like on. Darien isn't on the coast of the Sea of the Winds up here. It's actually south of. It's in the Gulf of Cherik, so it's like right around here ish. Just. Well, anyways, you've got your map at home, I think. So Darien is like right about there, I believe, on the Gulf of Cherik. Yeah. So northern Sandaria is where we're at now. So they made it to Darien. Garion saw the sea for the first time and was very awed by that. I thought maybe Puppy was sitting behind me, but Puppy is not. Um, they went to an inn, and then Garion went out with Silk to do some bartering, to get rid of some turnips and then to acquire a new cargo, though not from the town they were leaving. So they're going to leave. The plan was to leave with empty wagons and then pick up a cargo elsewhere. And then they had an interaction with a Murgo named Ashrak of Rakgoska, as they were acquiring their new cargo. You're looking at a smaller map. Oh, I see. Sorry. Ashrak of Rakgoska, who Garion identified as the rider on the dark horse, the shadowless rider that has visited Garion throughout his childhood. So that's, I think, kind of a surprise, especially since he doesn't really, I think, reveal that until the kind of the end of their interaction. Yes, you were looking at the smaller map of Sandaria, which is, I guess, an easier one to find Darien on. This one here, I assume you were looking at. So this is just Sandaria, basically, and Darien is right about there. But it's harder to make out exactly where that is in relation to the rest of the world on this map, because you can't really see, much of the Gulf of Cherik there. Yeah, and so that's roughly where we're at. I don't think they had left Darien and heading south, and Silk began teaching Garion the secret language, the sign language of Drasnia. And so that's kind of neat. I like that. Our young boy learning sign language, that's kind of cool. Yeah. That's something that has been weirdly absent from 5th edition D&D. Back in 3.5, the Drow, the Dark Elves, which have been getting a little bit of attention recently in 5th edition, but they had, among the different language options, they had a Drow sign language that I think was like an exotic language that you could pick, that Drow would use to communicate with each other silently. And in 5th edition, it's not in the languages list. It's not an option. And I don't really know why that's missing. I think probably a lot of people that include drow in their games that are used to previous editions probably just house rule it in. And I don't know whether it's maybe been added in any supplements since then, but it's not in the player's handbook. And then, as far as I'm aware, it's not in the Dungeon Master's Guide either. So I thought that was a little strange. Like, I don't know why they would exclude that specifically. Especially because I always thought that that was sort of a neat, flavorful little thing. Not too many fantasy settings I can think of that include sign languages. Wizards of the Coast has very recently, just within this past month, been putting out a lot of errata further removing alignment from the game. When I was saying that drow are getting attention, they are no longer just strictly lawful. I think it was lawful evil originally. Now they don't have an alignment requirement, and they're not all worshippers of Lolth. That's been kind of delegated to just being sort of a cult thing, and there are other drow that resist that and act against it. And wonder if the... Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, I think any race could employ sign language, but there are no sign languages in 5th edition that I have seen presented as language options. Unless you're suggesting that any language can be used as sign language. But if that were the case, I would expect them to say such explicitly. Instead, I just have seen no mention of any sign language. Which I think is, I don't know, a little disappointing. But yeah, they've been, unless something is like a planar creature, like an angel or a demon, in which case they are always strictly of a certain alignment. Other than that, they're basically removing like any alignment restrictions from any like class or race, it seems like, which I think is honestly a good move. I wasn't always a huge fan of alignment in 5th edition, but it's been interesting that they have been doing that. Like, it's just happening. Like, this edition has moved further away from alignment even in its launch. For instance, in like 3.5 again, which is an edition I have a lot of experience with, like if you wanted to play a paladin, you had to be lawful good unless you were like a prestige class that changed that or something like that. Like paladins had to be lawful good. Barbarians always had to be some form of chaotic, things like that. And 5th edition has done away with that already just from the release of the books, which I think is a great move. I think allows for more interesting character creation. But they're going further with it because, as an example, drow were still supposed to be evil, like as a rule, unless you were an exception to that rule. You know, the default drow was evil. There are other examples. Drow aren't the only ones that got this treatment, but a bunch of errata came out, changing a bunch of stuff in a lot of their books, and that was one of the things. One thing that I also appreciate is there is a certain slur for the Romani people that I'm not going to use that was used frequently in Curse of Strahd. And I was already kind of uncomfortable with that, you know, reading that book because I'm running it right now. But one of the errata that came out, there was errata for that book, and part of that was basically erasing that word out of the book. Of course, it's a printed book. I can't, other than like going in with a pen and crossing it out of my book, I can't really do that myself, so I just got to be mindful of it. But basically, you know, I appreciate that they are acting on that. I think they are trying to take steps to be more inclusive as a company as a whole, which I think is good. Anyways, it's 7:30 and I haven't started reading yet, so why don't I start reading rather than, I don't know how I got onto this tangent of just going. Sign language. I know how it was. It was talking about sign language. Garion's learning it. Let's read a book. Chapter 8. Okay. Oh, you heard about the rewrite. Nice. Actually, before I get started, I'm going to open my lemonade. My weird plastic can of lemonade. Is it even a can if it's made out of plastic? I feel like part of the property of a can is being made out of metal. The lid's metal. Oh, it's carbonated. I did not actually know it was carbonated. We bought it in a market. Just kind of, I don't know. We bought it at like an Asian foods market. And there's like some percentages on the front here. There's something that says 100%. And then something that says 0.108%. I don't think there's any alcohol in this. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know what I'm in for here. Jar? You think this maybe can? But it's not typically jars. Usually have a screw-on lid. And this is still plastic and not percentage daily. Well, there is the nutrient information. There's a bunch of percentages down here in like kind of the normal place for that. But maybe it's like vitamin C or something like that, since it's got a lemon on the front. Maybe it's like 100% of your daily vitamin C and 0.1. Yeah, maybe. Tastes pretty good. Yeah, I like it. It tastes both like lemonade, but also blue. It tastes like blue lemonade. I don't know what specifically the blue flavor is, but it tastes blue. I give it that, and also like lemonade. So of the information that I do have about this, it's holding up. It's under the bargain. Yeah, I like it. I would get that again if it were available. All right, Chapter 8. For a late start here. And a little bit later, we'll talk about what we should do for the rest of the year, when our next stream will be, and things like that. After the first day, the wind blew itself out, and the pale autumn sun reappeared. Their route southward led them along the Garion River, a turbulent stream that rushed down from the mountains on its way to the Gulf of Cherok. The country was hilly and timbered, but, since the wagons were empty, their horses made good time. They're going along the Garion River. I don't always follow maps, but since we were just looking at it, I'm not actually sure if on the larger map if the Garion River is even labeled. Or on the larger scale, but on the closer up map, it is. Looks like it goes south and then curves away to the west. Or to the east. To the east. I'm getting myself turned around, flipping this map around. But it comes from Garion and it curves away this way. Garion paid scant attention to the scenery as they trundled up the valley of the Garion. His attention was riveted almost totally on Silk's flickering fingers. Let's see if I can remember Silk's voice. That's the one that gets me. "Don't shout," Silk instructed as Garion practiced. "Shout?" Garion asked, puzzled. "Keep your gestures small. Don't exaggerate them. The idea is to make the whole business inconspicuous." "I'm only practicing," Garion said. "Better to break bad habits before they become too strong," Silk said. "And be careful not to mumble." "Mumble?" "Form each phrase precisely. Finish one before you go on to the next. Don't worry about speed. That comes with time." That seems like all good advice. By the third day, their conversations were half in words and half in gestures, and Garion was beginning to feel quite proud of himself. They pulled off the road into a grove of tall cedars that evening and formed up their usual half-circle with the wagons. "How goes the instruction?" Mr. Wolf asked as he climbed down. "It progresses," Silk said. "I expect it'll go more rapidly when the boy outgrows his tendency to use baby talk." Garion was crushed. Barak, who was also dismounting, laughed. "I've often thought that the secret language might be useful to know," he said, "but fingers built to grip a sword aren't nimble enough for it." He held out his huge hand and shook his head. Dernick lifted his face and sniffed at the air. "It's going to be cold tonight," he said. "We'll have frost before morning." Barak also sniffed, and then he nodded. "You're right, Dernick," he rumbled. "We'll need a good fire tonight." He reached into the wagon and lifted out his axe. "There are riders coming," Aunt Pole announced, still seated on the wagon. They all stopped talking and listened to the faint drumming sound on the road they had just left. "3 at least," Barak said grimly. He handed... It's going to be a while. I gotta stop. I think I need to disassociate the word grim from bard. Because otherwise, every time I see the word grim, I'm going to have to, stop and, stop myself from laughing. Every time. I was past the sentence and then I started to laugh at it. Parmo says, "Never! Grim bard forever!" Alright. Let me go back. 3 at least, Barak said grimly. He handed the axe to Dernick and reached back into the wagon for his sword. 4, Silk said. He stepped to his own wagon and took his own sword out from under the seat. "We're far enough from the road," Wolf said. "If we stay still, they'll pass without seeing us." "That won't hide us from Grolims," Aunt Pole said. "They won't be searching with their eyes." She made 2 quick gestures to Wolf, which Garion did not recognize. "No," Wolf gestured back. "Let us instead." He also made an unrecognizable gesture. Aunt Pole looked at him for a moment, and then nodded. "All of you stay quite still," Wolf instructed them. Then he turned toward the road, his face intent. Garion held his breath. The sound of the galloping horses grew nearer. Then a strange thing happened. Though Garion knew he should be fearful of the approaching riders and the threat they seemed to pose, a kind of dreamy lassitude fell over him. It was as if his mind had quite suddenly gone to sleep, leaving his body still standing there, watching incuriously the passage of those dark-mantled horsemen along the road. How long he stood so, he was not able to say, but when he roused from his half-dream, the riders were gone, and the sun had set. The sky to the east had grown purple with approaching evening, and there were tatters of sun-stained clouds along the western horizon. "Murgos," Aunt Pole said quite calmly, "and 1 Grolim." She started to climb down from the wagon. "There are many Murgos in Sandaria, great lady," Silk said, helping her down, "and on many different missions." "Murgos are one thing," Wolf said grimly, "but Grolims are quite something else. I think it might be better if we moved off the well-traveled roads. Do you know a back way to Medalia?" "Old friend," Silk replied modestly, "I know a back way to every place." "Good," Wolf said.
Let's move deeper into these woods. I'd prefer it if no chance gleam from our fire reached the road.
Garion had seen the cloaked Murgos only briefly. There was no way to be sure if one of them had been that same Asherak he had finally met after all the years of knowing him only as a dark figure on a black horse. But somehow he was almost certain that Asherak had been among them. Asherak would follow him, would be there wherever he went. It was the kind of thing one could count on. Dernick had been right when he had spoken of frost. The ground was white with it the next morning, and the horses' breath steamed in the chill air as they set out. They moved along lanes and little-used tracks that were partially weed-choked. The going was slower than it might have been on the main road, but they all felt much safer. It took them 5 more days to reach the village of Winold, some 12 leagues to the north of Medallia. There, at Aunt Pole's insistence, they stopped overnight at a somewhat run-down inn. "I refuse to sleep on the ground again," she announced flatly. After they had eaten in the dingy common room of the inn, the men turned to their ale-pots, and Aunt Pole went up to her chamber with instructions that hot water be brought to her for bathing. Garion, however, made some pretext about checking the horses and went outside. It was not that he was in the habit of being deliberately deceptive, but it had occurred to him in the last day or so that he had not had a single moment alone since they had left Faldor's farm. He was not by nature a solitary boy, but he had begun to feel quite keenly the restriction of always being in the presence of his elders. Yeah, pretty tasty. It's got a little bit of an aftertaste, but it doesn't last for too long, so that's good. The village of Winold was not a large one, and he explored it from one end to the other in less than half an hour, loitering along its narrow cobblestoned streets in the crispness of the early evening air. The windows of the houses glowed with golden candlelight, and Garion suddenly felt a great surge of homesickness. Then, at the next corner of the crooked street, in the brief light from an opening door, he saw a familiar figure. He could not be positive, but he shrank back against the rough stone wall anyway. The man at the corner turned in irritation toward the light, and Garion caught the sudden white gleam from one of his eyes. It was Brill. The unkempt man moved quickly out of the light, obviously not wishing to be seen. Then he stopped. Garion hugged the wall, watching Brill's impatient pacing at the corner. The wisest thing would have been to slip away and hurry back to the inn, but Garion quickly dismissed that idea. He was safe enough here in the deep shadow beside the wall, and he was too caught up by curiosity to leave without seeing exactly what Brill was doing here. After what seemed hours, but was really only a few more minutes, another shadowy shape came scurrying down the street. The man was hooded, so it was impossible to see his face, but the outline of his form revealed a figure dressed in the tunic, hose, and calf-length boots of an ordinary centaur. There was also, when he turned, the outline of a sword belted at his waist, and that was far from ordinary. While it was not precisely illegal for centaurs of the lower classes to bear arms, it was uncommon enough to attract notice. Garion tried to edge close enough to hear what Brill said to the man with the sword, but they spoke only briefly. There was a clink as some coins changed hands, and then the two separated. Brill moved quietly off around the corner, and the man with the sword walked up the narrow, crooked street toward the spot where Garion stood. There was no place to hide, and as soon as the hooded man came close enough, he would be able to see Garion. To turn and run would be even more dangerous. Since there was no alternative, Garion put on a bold front and marched determinedly toward the oncoming figure.
"Who's there?"
the hooded man demanded, his hand going to his sword hilt. "Good evening, sir," Garion said, deliberately forcing his voice up into the squeaky registers of a much younger boy. That came across right. "Cold night, isn't it?" The hooded man grunted and seemed to relax. Garion's legs quivered with the desire to run. He passed the man with the sword, and his back prickled as he felt that suspicious gaze follow him.
"Boy,"
the man said abruptly. Garion stopped. "Yes, sir?" he said, turning.
"Do you live here?"
"Yes, sir," Garion lied, trying to keep his voice from trembling.
"Is there a tavern hereabouts?"
Garion had just explored the town, and he spoke confidently. "Yes, sir," he said. "You go on up this street to the next corner and turn to your left. There are torches out front. You can't miss it."
"My thanks,"
the hooded man said shortly, and walked on up the narrow street. "Good night, sir," Garion called after him, made bold by the fact that the danger seemed past. Cheeky. The man did not answer, and Garion marched on down to the corner, exhilarated by his brief encounter. Once he was around the corner, however, he dropped the guise of a simple village boy and ran. He was breathless by the time he reached the inn — I guess the inn is separate from the tavern — and burst into the smoky common room where Mr. Wolf and the others sat talking by the fire. At the last instant, realizing that to blurt out his news in the common room where others might overhear would be a mistake, he forced himself to walk calmly to where his friend sat. He stood before the fire, as if warming himself, and spoke in a low tone. "I just saw Brill in the village," he said. "Brill?" Silk asked. "Who's Brill?"
Wolf frowned. "A farmhand with too much Angarak gold in his purse to be entirely honest," he said.
Quickly he told Silk and Barak about the adventure in Faldor's stable.
"You should have killed him,"
Barak rumbled.
"This isn't Sherek," Wolf said. "Sendars are touchy about casual killings."
He turned to Garion.
"Did he see you?" he asked.
"No," Garion said. "I saw him first and hid in the dark. He met another man and gave him some money, I think. The other man had a sword." Briefly he described the whole incident.
"This changes things," Wolf said. "I think we'll leave earlier in the morning than we'd planned."
"It wouldn't be hard to make Brill lose interest in us," Dernick said. "I could probably find him and hit him on the head a few times." "Oh, Dernick."
"Tempting," Wolf grinned. "But I think it might be better just to slip out of town early tomorrow and leave him with no notion that we've ever been here. We don't really have time to start fighting with everyone we run across."
"I'd like a closer look at this sword-carrying Sendar, however," Silk said, rising. "If it turns out that he's following us, I'd rather know what he looks like. I don't like being followed by strangers."
"Discreetly," Wolf cautioned.
Silk laughed. "Have you ever known me to be otherwise?" he asked. "This won't take long. Where did you say that tavern was, Garion?" Garion gave him directions. Silk nodded, his eyes bright and his long nose twitching. He turned, went quickly across the smoky common room, and out into the chill night.
I wonder,
Barak considered.
if we're being followed this closely, wouldn't it be better to discard the wagons and this tiresome disguise, buy good horses, and simply make straight for Muros at a gallop?
Wolf shook his head.
I don't think the Murgos are all that certain where we are, he said. Brill could be here for some other dishonesty, and we'd be foolish to start running from shadows. Better just to move on quietly. Even if Brill's still working for the Murgos, I'd rather just slip away and leave them all beating the bushes here in central Sandaria.
He stood up.
I'm going to step upstairs and let Pole know what's happened.
He crossed the common room and mounted the stairs.
I still don't like it,
Barak muttered, his face dark. Little voice-changing squeak there? Was that when Garion was doing the childish voice, or was it a different one? I see. Page 100. They sat quietly then, waiting for Silk's return. The fire popped, and Garion started slightly. It occurred to him as he waited that he had changed a great deal since they'd left Faldor's farm. Everything had seemed simple then, with the world neatly divided into friends and enemies. In the short time since they'd left, however, he'd begun to perceive complexities that he hadn't imagined before. He'd grown wary and distrustful, and listened more frequently to that interior voice that always advised caution, if not outright guile. He'd also learned not to accept anything at face value. Briefly, he regretted the loss of his former innocence, but the dry voice told him that such regret was childish. Then Mr. Wolf came back down the stairs and rejoined them. After about a half hour, Silk returned. I feel like I'm skipping words here. Thoroughly disreputable-looking fellow, he said, standing in front of the fire. My guess is that he's a common footpad.
Brill's seeking his natural level, Wolf observed. If he's still working for the Murgos, he's probably hiring ruffians to watch for us. They'll be looking for 4 people on foot, however, rather than 6 in wagons. If we can get out of Winold early enough in the morning, I think we can elude them altogether.
I think Dernick and I should stand watch tonight, Barak said.
Not a bad idea, Wolf agreed. Let's plan to leave about the 4th hour after midnight. I'd like to have 2 or 3 leagues of back roads between us and this place when the sun comes up.
Garion scarcely slept that night. When he did, there were nightmares about a hooded man with a cruel sword chasing him endlessly down dark, narrow streets. When Barak woke them, Garion's eyes felt sandy, and his head was thick from the exhausting night. Oh. Problem with a chewy cookie is, I feel like I probably shouldn't continue reading while I'm chewing on it. Yeah, cookie. It's almost Christmas. I gotta celebrate with a cookie, obviously. Aunt Pole carefully drew the shutters in their chamber before lighting a single candle. It's going to be colder now, she said, opening the large bundle she'd had him carry up from the wagons. She took out a pair of heavy woolen hose and winter boots lined with lamb's wool. Put these on, she instructed Garion, and your heavy cloak. I'm not a baby anymore, Aunt Pole, Garion said. Do you enjoy being cold? Well, no, but... He stopped, unable to think of any words to explain how he felt. He began to dress. He could hear the faint murmur of the others talking softly in the adjoining chamber, in that curious, hushed tone that men always assume when they rise before the sun. "We're ready, Mistress Pole," Silk's voice came through the doorway. "Let's leave, then," she said, drawing up the hood of her cloak. The moon had risen late that night and shone brightly on the frost-silvered stones outside the inn. Dernick had hitched the horses to the wagons and had led them out of the stable. "We'll leave the horses out to the road," Wolf said very quietly. "I don't see any need for rousing the villagers as we pass." It's considerate of him. Silk again took the lead, and they moved slowly out of the inn-yard. The fields beyond the village were white with frost, and the pale, smoky-looking moonlight seemed to have leached all color from them. "As soon as we're well out of earshot," Wolf said, climbing up into his wagon, "let's put some significant distance between us and this place. The wagons are empty, and a little run won't hurt the horses." "Truly," Silk agreed. They all mounted their wagons and set off at a walk. The stars glittered overhead in the crisp, cold sky. Oh. Look at that relaxation going on there. Just fully down on his side. He flop. Alright. They all mounted their wagons and set off at a walk. The stars glittered overhead in the crisp, cold sky. The fields were very white in the moonlight, and the clumps of trees back from the road very dark. Just as they went over the first hilltop, Garion looked back at the dark cluster of houses in the valley behind. A single flicker of light came from a window somewhere, a lone golden pinpoint that appeared and then vanished. "Someone's awake back there," he told Silk. "I just saw a light." "Some early riser, perhaps," Silk suggested. But then again, perhaps not. He shook the reins slightly, and the horses increased their pace. He shook them again, and they began to trot. "Hang on, boy," he instructed, reached forward, and slapped the reins down smartly on the rumps of the horses. The wagon bounced and clattered fearfully behind the running team, and the bitterly chill air rushed at Garion's face as he clung to the wagon seat. At full gallop, the 3 wagons plunged down into the next valley, rushing between the frost-white fields in the bright moonlight, leaving the village and its single light far behind. By the time the sun rose, they had covered a good 4 leagues, and Silk reined in the steaming horses. Garion felt battered and sore from the wild ride over the iron-hard roads, and was glad for the chance to rest. Silk handed him the reins and jumped down from the wagon. He walked back and spoke briefly to Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole, then returned to the wagon. "We turn off at that lane just ahead," he told Garion as he massaged his fingers. Garion offered him the reins. "You drive," Silk told him. "My hands are frozen stiff. Just let the horses walk." Garion clucked at the horses and shook the reins slightly. Obediently, the team started out again. The lane circles around to the back of that hill, Silk said, pointing with his chin since his hands were tucked inside his tunic. On the far side, there's a copse of... Copse? Is that the right pronunciation? That's one that I have wondered about in the past. I think it's copse, but I'm not certain. There's a copse of fir trees. We'll stop there to rest the horses. Farmouse usually says copse. But who knows? Well, somebody knows. Probably the internet knows. But it's not that important. I'm sure it'll only come up 15 to 20 more times. Let's see. Do you think we're being followed? Garion asked. This'll be a good time to find out, Silk said. They rounded the hill and drove on down to where the dark firs bordered the road. Sharkies also think copse. I don't think I've ever read it that way. I reached for the cookie and then I was like, you know what, maybe not. Maybe I'll wait till I'm finished reading. Let's see. They rounded the hill and drove on down to where the dark firs bordered the road. Then Garion turned the horses and moved in under the shadowy trees. This'll do fine, Silk said, getting down. Come along. Where are we going? Internet also says copse. All right, it's a copse of trees, apparently. Apparently I was just wrong in my head about that one. Thank you. I want to have a look at that road behind us, Silk said. We'll go up through the trees to the top of the hill and see if our back trail has attracted any interest. And he started up the hill, moving quite rapidly, but making absolutely no sound as he went. Garion floundered along behind him, his feet cracking the dead twigs underfoot embarrassingly, until he began to catch the secret of it. Silk nodded approvingly once, but said nothing. Garion's picking up all kinds of skills. The trees ended just at the crest of the hill, and Silk stopped there. The valley below, with the dark road passing through it, was empty except for 2 deer who had come out of the woods on the far side to graze in the frosty grass. We'll wait a while, Silk said. If Brill and his hireling are following, they shouldn't be far behind. He sat on a stump and watched the empty valley. After a while, a cart moved slowly along the road toward Winold. It looked tiny in the distance, and its pace along the scar of the road seemed very slow. The sun rose a bit higher, and they squinted into its full morning brightness. Silk, Garion said finally, in a hesitant tone. Yes, Garion? What's this all about? It was a bold question to ask, but Garion felt he knew Silk well enough to ask it. All what? What we're doing. I've heard a few things and guessed a few more, but it doesn't really make any sense to me. And just what have you guessed, Garion? Silk asked, his small eyes very bright in his unshaven face. Something's been stolen, something very important, and Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole, and the rest of us, are trying to get it back. All right, Silk said, that much is true. Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole are not at all what they seem to be, Garion went on. No, Silk agreed, they aren't. I think they can do things that other people can't do, Garion said, struggling with the words. Mr. Wolf can follow this thing, whatever it is, without seeing it. And last week, in those woods, when the Murgos passed, they did something. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was almost as if they reached out and put my mind to sleep. How did they do that? And why? Silk chuckled. You're a very observant lad, he said. Then his tone became more serious. We're living in momentous times, Garion. The events of 1,000 years and more have all focused on these very days. The world, I'm told, is like that. Centuries pass when nothing happens, and then, in a few short years, events of such tremendous importance take place that the world is never the same again. I think that if I had my choice, I'd prefer one of those quiet centuries, Garion said glumly. Same, Garion. Same. Oh, no, Silk said, his lips drawing back in a ferret-like grin. Now's the time to be alive, to see it all happen, to be a part of it. That makes the blood race, and each breath is an adventure. Garion let that pass. What is this thing we're following? He asked. It's best if you don't even know its name, Silk told him seriously, or the name of the one who stole it. There are people trying to stop us, and what you don't know, you can't reveal. I'm not in the habit of talking to Murgos, Garion said stiffly. It's not necessary to talk to them, Silk said. There are some among them who can reach out and pick the thoughts right out of your mind. That isn't possible, Garion said. Who's to say what's possible and what isn't? Silk asked. And Garion remembered a conversation he had once had with Mr. Wolf about the possible and the impossible. Silk sat on the stump in the newly risen sun, looking thoughtfully down into the still shadowy valley. An ordinary-looking little man, in ordinary-looking tunic and hose, and a rough brown shoulder cape, with its hood turned up over his head. You were raised as a Cendar, Garion, he said, and Cendars are solid, practical men, with little patience for such things as sorcery and magic and other things that can't be seen or touched. Your friend Dernick is a perfect Cendar. He can mend a shoe, or fix a broken wheel, or dose a sick horse. But I doubt he could bring himself to believe in the tiniest bit of magic. I am a Cendar, Garion objected. The hint implicit in Silk's observation struck at the very center of his sense of his own identity. Silk turned and looked at him closely. No, he said, you aren't. I know a Cendar when I see one, just as I can recognize the difference between an Errand and a Tolnedron, or a Cherrick and an Algar. There's a certain set of the head, a certain look about the eyes of Cendars that you don't have. You're not a Cendar. What am I, then? Garion challenged. I don't know, Silk said with a puzzled frown. And that's very unusual, since I've been trained to know what people are. It may come to me in time, though. Is Aunt Pole a Cendar? Garion asked. Of course not, Silk laughed. That explains it, then, Garion said. I'm probably the same thing she is. Silk looked sharply at him. She's my father's sister, after all, Garion said. At first I thought it was my mother she was related to, but that was wrong. It was my father, I know that now. That's impossible, Silk said flatly. Impossible? Absolutely out of the question, The whole notion's unthinkable. Why? Silk chewed at his lower lip for a moment. Let's go back to the wagons, he said shortly. They turned and went down through the dark trees with the bright morning sunlight slanting on their backs in the frosty air. They rode the back lanes for the rest of the day. Late in the afternoon, when the sun had begun to drop into a purple bank of clouds towards the west, they arrived at the farm where they were to pick up Mingan's hams. I forgot about the hams. So I had a whole conversation today with our friend Robot Kyo. Let me just, there was a headline here. I don't know whether or not the text will show up. There we go. The expert ham sniffer of Spain smells 800 hams a day during the Christmas season. He is strained, he said, at the limit of human possibility. Ham Sniffers of Spain. Did you know that that was a profession? Did you know that there are professional ham sniffers? I had no idea. Sharky say, yay hams. But those poor ham sniffers, they're at the limit of human possibility. Won't anyone think of the ham sniffers? Alright, I'm gonna have a bite of this cookie. Oh. I wonder whether anyone sniffed Mingan's hams. Or is that a rude question? I'm back here. Camera. Hello, it's me. Wow, you guys are gonna get real used to the look of my hand. Sounds like the basis for a limerick. There once was a ham sniffer of Spain. Farmos really doesn't know what they'd be trying to sniff for. Like, are they like, yep, that's ham? Or, aha, there's the ham. I can smell it. There once was a ham sniffer from Spain. You know, I imagine that it's a quality control sort of thing. I imagine it's probably like, you know, expensive Spanish hams, and they're sniffing them for imperfections or something like that maybe aren't so easily identified by sight. I'm very blurry right now. I don't feel that blurry. Camera. Hey, look. I'm back here. Whatever. There once was a ham sniffer from Spain who in winter caused his nose to strain. He smelt 800 hams. Someone else can finish it off. He smelt 800 hams in a day. Ooh, the spice is off, or that one is too sweet. Yeah, maybe. Maybe smelling for things like, I don't know, hams that haven't cured properly and are off. I didn't hear him come back. Puppy is flopped out over here. He's looking at me. There once was a ham sniffer from Spain who in winter caused his nose to strain. He sniffed 800 hams in a day. And then what? Alright. Anyways, Mingan's hams. After that very interesting conversation between Silk and Garion, don't you think? find there's a little bit of tension there. Garion is learning things that maybe he would rather not learn. All right. They arrived at the farm where they were to pick up Mingan's hams. Silk spoke with the stout farmer and showed him the piece of parchment Mingan had given them in Doreen.
"I'll be glad to get rid of them," the farmer said. "They've been occupying storage space I sorely need."
That's frequently the case when one has dealings with Tolnedrans, Silk observed. They're gifted at getting a bit more than they pay for, even if it's only the free use of someone else's storage sheds. The farmer glumly agreed. "I wonder," Silk said, as if the thought had just occurred to him, "I wonder if you might have seen a friend of mine. Brill, by name? A medium-sized man with black hair and beard and a cast to one eye." He smelled 800 a day, then proceeded to say, "Oh no, bad hams."
"Patched clothes and a sour disposition?" the stout farmer asked.
"That's him," Silk said.
"He's been about the area," the farmer said, "looking, or so he said, for an old man and a woman and a boy. He said that they stole some things from his master and that he'd been sent to find them."
"How long ago was that?" Silk asked.
"Oh, a week or so," the farmer said.
"I'm sorry to have missed him," Silk said. "I wish I had the leisure to look him up."
"I can't for my life think why," the farmer said bluntly. "To be honest with you, I didn't much care for your friend."
"I'm not over fond of him myself," Silk agreed. "But the truth is that he owes me some money. I could quite easily do without Brill's companionship, but I'm lonesome for the money, if you take my meaning." The farmer laughed. "I'd take it as a kindness if you happened to forget that I asked after him," Silk said. "He'll likely be hard enough to find, even if he isn't warned that I'm looking for him."
"You can depend on my discretion," the stout man said, still laughing. "I have a loft where you and your wagoneers can put up for the night, and I'd take it kindly if you'd sup with my workers in the dining hall over there."
"My thanks," Silk said, bowing slightly. "The ground's cold, and it's been some time since we've eaten anything but the rough fare of the road."
"You wagoneers lead adventuresome lives," the stout man said, almost enviously. "Free as birds, with always a new horizon just beyond the next hilltop."
"It's much overrated," Silk told him, "and winter's a thin time for birds and wagoneers both." The farmer laughed again, clapped Silk on the shoulder, and then showed him where to put up the horses. I'm going to get back to that limerick when I finish this. The food in the stout farmer's dining hall was plain, but there was plenty, and the loft was a bit draughty, but the hay was soft. Garion slept soundly. The farm was not Faldor's, but it was familiar enough, and there was that comforting sense of having walls about him again that made him feel secure. The following morning, after a solid breakfast, they loaded the wagons with the Tolnedran's salt-crusted hams and bade the farmer a friendly goodbye. The clouds that had begun to bank up in the west the evening before had covered the sky during the night, and it was cold and gray as they set out for Muros, 50 leagues to the south. That brings us to page 108 and the end of chapter 8. And it's 8:20. If I hadn't started so late, maybe we'd read a bit more, but I did start pretty late tonight. All right, let's see. There once was a ham sniffer from Spain, who in winter caused his nose to strain. He smelled 800 a day, then proceeded to say, I'll ne'er do ham smelling again. Or, I've sniffed so much I'm out of touch, and sniffed my nose away. And then Farmos just yells, cram. Cram! Oh. Road food. We catch 'em, you buy 'em. Can't see the full pup. He's sort of laying with his head just out of frame here. Winking at me. Winking and blinking at me. Well, there were some interesting bits in that chapter. I really liked that conversation between Silk and Garion. I think that just some of the bits of that exchange were pretty interesting. Oh, here he goes. Puppy! So, today is the 22nd. Let's look at our calendar, shall we? The 24th, I am out of town. So we're going to skip this Friday for sure for Christmas Eve. I hope everybody has a very lovely time with their families. I hope everybody's got some nice presents or something, good food. Sharky say, I need 6 hams. That's too expensive. Next Wednesday, a week from today, is the 29th. Now, of course, that is sort of in that awkward stretch of time there, between Christmas and New Year's, where, people are frequently busy. I'm pretty sure that I'll be back home by then. I'd be a bit surprised if I wasn't. So we could do the 29th if everybody would like, but if you would prefer to not, I would understand that as well. If you're going to be busy for any reason, we could easily skip that one. And then Friday is the 31st. And I think we're not really supposed to do New Year's celebrations. I don't think we're mixing Beauty and the Beast with Aladdin. I see. Because of my we catch 'em, you buy 'em to the road food. 6 eggs, 6 hams. Anyways, I don't think that we have any plans personally for New Year's Eve. We'll be going back out of town again on the 1st, but on the 31st we should be here, and I don't think we're really doing too much, and especially not at like 8 o'clock. We'll probably stay up till midnight, and I don't know if we're gonna bang some pots or what. But we did kind of talk about possibly doing sugar dates and hams, sugar dates and pistachios. So Sharkies, what do you think? The 29th and the 31st. Would you like to do streams on either of those days? Would you like me to continue to read on either of those days? Erica is not here. Robotq is not here to voice their opinions, so it's up to you. everybody gets a vote, and by everybody I mean Farmouse and the Sharkies. I'm perfectly happy either way. The 20th, I assume you mean the 29th. Alright, so we'll do the 29th. And then we can talk about it again then. So a week from today is going to be the next stream. But we will not, of course, do this Friday. So it's going to be a little bit longer between streams. Yeah. Farmhouse and I just saw the new Spider-Man. Of course, I will not say I won't spoil anything. There's a hyphen. Spider-man. Yeah. Without talking about the content of the movie, Spider-Man or Dune. Yeah, we haven't seen Dune yet. A bunch of my friends wanted to see it, but, it just wasn't convenient. The timing didn't work out. There it is right behind me. Spider-Man. Yes. Spider hyphen man. Spider hyphen man. Hyphen's part of the name. But Spider-Man, the only thing I'll say about that is I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think you would enjoy it more if you've seen as many of the previous Spider-Man movies as there are. The more Spider-Man movies you've seen, the more you'll enjoy the new one, I think. But it was great. Really liked it. Hyphen Man. That's a different hero. I think there was a bit in one of the new Spider-Man games, the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 games, which are really good. If you have a PS4, I highly recommend Spider-Man. I've enjoyed a lot of Spider-Man games, but the web swinging was great in them. It all just felt really good. Anyways, there was a bit of conversation in one of those games where he points out that the hyphen is part of the name. Don't leave out the hyphen. Yeah. All right. I'll see you in a week. Between now and then, it'll be Christmas time, so, be prepared to tell me all about how that goes. How what everybody gets for presents, and what delicious meals everyone has, and things like that. I look forward to hearing about it, yeah. Have a very Merry Christmas. Thank you all for joining me tonight. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone in a week. Alright. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a good night. Bye. Same to all yous.